Welcome to C4JR's new podcast series, More Than Ink on Paper, implementing the Yazidi Survivors Law, through which we intend to platform relevant voices around the YSL, as it's known, which has too often also been referred to as ink on paper by some survivors of ISIS crimes to voice their doubts about the government's commitment to delivering long-awaited reparations guarantees under the legislation. We'll be speaking to those working to ensure that this is not the case and take a sweeping look at issues of transitional justice and accountability in Iraq through the process of seeking to implement the law. Joining us on the YSL podcast today is the renowned expert in transitional justice and human rights, Clara Sandoval, and Shireen Khudeeda, a Yazidi activist and member of the Yazidi Survivors Network and a very recent graduate of the American University of Kurdistan, AUK, in Duhok, where she graduated in business management. Clara Sandoval is a qualified lawyer and leading expert on reparations, human rights, and transitional justice. She currently serves as Director of Programs at the Global Survivors Fund, launched in October 2019, and is a professor at the University of Essex School of Law, as well as the Geneva Academy. She has successfully litigated cases before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, served as an expert on reparations in cases involving sexual violence before the ICC, worked with the UN and CSOs, and her work with survivors of conflict-related sexual violence has focused on domestic reparation programs in countries like Colombia, Peru, Iraq, Guatemala, and Chile. Shireen Khudeeda is a Yazidi woman who survived ISIS, graduated from the American University of Kurdistan in Duhok on Sunday, just yesterday, the day before we are recording this podcast. She was held for a few years and returned to the Kurdistan region of Iraq in 2017. And yesterday, the Kurdistan Regional Government Prime Minister Masroor Barzani presented her with the very extremely well-deserved honour of Resilience Award. And we're so grateful that you can join us also on the podcast, Shireen. I know it's been a really busy few days for you. And congratulations again. And I think...
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And
thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And actually, I think as we celebrate you and recognise your incredible achievement today, we should also just take a moment to really honour the resilience and strength of so much of the Yazidi community. Just show our solidarity with survivors to ensure your voices are heard, your stories are not forgotten, and that your courage and perseverance is proven to enact the change that we all want to see. So the way that this podcast will work is I'm going to ask Clara some questions about the work of the Global Survivors Fund, and Shireen, it would be great for you to chip in whenever you feel like commenting from your own perspective on the reality of the situation. And I'm also going to direct questions to you about your work with the Yazidi Survivors Network. And equally, Clara, feel free at any point to kind of come in yourself with Shireen's comments. But to start with, or Shireen, actually, if you'd like to just say a few words about how your graduation went and how you feel, if you have any reflections on that amazing achievement, I think listeners would be happy to hear.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, it was amazing, and I was honored to that the Kurdistan authorities recognized what I did, and they give me the Honor Resilience Award. And both the president and the prime minister, they talked about that in the event for graduation ceremony for 2024. It was something amazing, and I'm so grateful for that. And I feel that finally my father dream was come true. So thank you so much for you and for them for what they did. Do something amazing.
Thank you. Well, on that note, just showing how, incredibly important that is. Clara, perhaps you could tell us a bit about your work and comment on Shireen's achievement too, and also, just a little bit about the Global Survivors Fund and its work on reparations for survivors of CRS.
Alannah, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this podcast. I think it's super important to put the topic of reparation on the table and to share with others why it matters. And I'm going to start talking about the Global Survivors Fund because I think the fund is a vehicle, an international vehicle that can allow us to really enable reparation for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. The fund was established in 2019 by two Nobel Peace Prize winners, Dr. Mukwege and Nadia Murad. Nadia Murad from Iraq, a wonderful Yazidi like Shireen, who, after surviving the terrible crimes committed by ISIS, spoke out and stood up to those international crimes to show why survivors matter, should matter to every one of us, and why there is a pending massive debt with them that we all, including the perpetrators, must pay. When Dr. Mukwege and Nadia Murad asked a group of survivors from the SEMA network, that is the biggest international network of survivors, what can we do for you now that we won the Nobel Peace Prize? The survivors answered, what we need the most and have the least is reparation. So if you can help us work on that, that will be great. We need reparation. We need to be able to deal with the harms we've suffered. Everyone promises that, but no one delivers on it. And that's how the fund is created, to enable reparation for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. What is unique about it? The way we work and who we work with. How we work, we act. We act because where states are unable or unwilling to provide reparation to victims, survivors, what the GSF does is to stand in and with survivors, co-creating with survivors, giving them the center, giving them the voice, but standing by their side. We put in place what we call interim reparative measures, IRM, interim reparative measures, in order to ensure that there is a process that is dignifying, that recognizes them as right holders, and that provides them through that process with different reparative measures, very similar to reparation. So it could be compensation, access to medical and psychological care, vocational training, collective forms of repair, that they find as necessary to address the harms they've suffered. And GSF does this with other stakeholders. We bring state actors, we bring the UN, we bring experts, we bring survivors. And through steering committees, we put these projects in place that last 3 to 4 years. And they are called, as I said, interim reparative measure projects. They are not reparation because we do not have the obligation under international law to provide reparation, but they are very similar to reparation. And what we want to show with this act is that it is feasible and affordable to provide reparation. We want to create the evidence base that shows the states and the perpetrators that we can actually do it. That when they say to us, we cannot do it because it's expensive, because we don't know how to do it, because survivors and victims can wait. Well, no, actually it is possible, it is feasible, it is affordable. And we also act providing urgent repair, and here is reparation, as we are doing, for example, now in Ukraine, when governments call us and say, we acknowledge we have an obligation to provide reparation, we can do it together, bring us the technical support, help us to do it. We also step in. Then we talk about reparation, and we do it with the states and with other relevant actors as well. So this is very unique because, as I say, is the way to show states that you can actually deliver on it. And you bring the pieces, but you also show something that is crucial and also makes us very, very different to other organizations or people trying to think about reparation, and is that we co-create with survivors. This is not a top-down approach where we tell survivors what they need or what they should want. No, we work for them. Survivors like Shireen are at the center, where they should always be, where recognized, acknowledged, and really leading and exercising their full agency about how these processes should happen and how they must produce results in terms of reparative measures for them. But we also advocate and we also provide technical support. We guide, as we call it. And we try to bring these different dimensions of our work together in order to enhance access to reparation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And we should just say for listeners that the passing of the Yazidi Survivors Law on March 1st, 2021 in Iraq marked a really important milestone in Iraq's post-conflict recovery period, and specifically for Yazidi Shabbat and Christian survivors who it promised to deliver long-awaited relief to, predominantly women subjected to conflict-related sexual violence by ISIS, but also to men and women from the communities that survived mass killings, as well as captured Yazidi children. And it's, like Clara was saying, it's an example of a state taking deliberative action to address the rights and needs of survivors. And for listeners who are interested, please do check out the CPJR website, where we have, the full information of what the YSL, the Yazidi Survivors Law, mandates, and our recent report, which sort of showed the progress and different measures, because financial reparations are being received by over 1,600 women now, but the YSL also mandates a number of other critical sponsored measures, such as medical, psychological care, provision of land, housing, education, quota of public sector employment, and so on, which is being worked on, but of course there are still many issues in terms of implementation. Shireen, I wonder if you would like to speak a little bit from your experience and on behalf of your community, as to what the YSL kind of means for you or meant for you when you heard about, the law being passed in the Iraqi parliament 3 years ago now, and the experience of having the reparations and the process of the law being passed kind of being more centered, I think, on the victim than it has in many other examples.
Yeah. So when we were working on the draft, we were hope that it will come true one day, but all the time we're saying, okay, it's still a draft. And then after passing it by the president of Iraq on 8th of March, and they didn't implement that law for a while, then everybody was saying it's just ink on paper and nothing will happen. So after that, when they tried to start with salaries to provide the survivors with, because of the bad economic condition for the families of survivors and survivors itself. So, and then that the fund for NGOs and local and international NGOs is now less for Iraq because of what's happening in Ukraine and in Palestine. So everybody was saying that, okay, this is gonna stay just on ink on paper. But after trying to implement that, there was a huge load trying to apply for the salaries. So after some of survivors received their first salaries, it was like, okay, this achievement, we did it and it happened. And actually, I think everybody tried their best in this law. Mr. Saeb Khader was at that time, as he was in the Iraqi parliament, and he did his best. And he was standing with us all the time. We're going to those conferences, the meetings and everything, and to just update the draft and try to make it in the best way that can serve the survivors. So with let's say everybody's efforts, we did it, and finally now people are receiving their salaries, even the survivors who are living outside. And I think recently they tried to give some survivors piece of land, which is, I think, 250 meters, a piece of land for each family to build a house for them. And they promised to give them loans without profits, so they can just build their houses and go to Sinjar. So, and Tel Afar as well. So it's something good. And I hope that they will implement more and more from Survivors Law.
Thank you so much, because you actually you hinted at something which is another fascinating aspect of the legislation, which I might ask Clara about, which is that the Yazidi Survivors Law also kind of it's the associated bylaws, I should say, expand the obligations of the law. For example, asking for really quite almost very innovative things of the government to sort of an obligation on government agencies to develop specialized curricula on the ISIS conflict, and also there's a stipulation to prevent the recurrence of the violations that occurred against the minorities. And as Shireen was saying, there are very clear sort of reparative measures in the law, including financial support, but also provision of land and housing, education, and so forth, on top of recognizing that ISIS committed genocide and crimes against humanity against Yazidis, Christian, Turkmen, and Shabak minority groups, which is significant and passed by the Iraqi government, parliament, which is part of the Iraq state. So I guess turning back to Clara, the YSL isn't a typical piece of legislation establishing just an administrative reparations program, because in addition to the usual measures such as compensation, there are a number of other measures and benefits. So the question is, it seems as if it aspires to outline a transitional justice framework rather than just a run-of-the-mill reparation legislation. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? And what the question's hinting at is whether placing such wide-reaching obligations on fragile institutions might lead to failure to implement, whereas a more straightforward reparation program might be easier to put into practice.
Well, Alannah, that is a great question, and it allows me to address some misconceptions that we sometimes work with. And are this. What is transitional justice about? Transitional justice is a set of processes that aim to deal with the legacy of mass atrocities. In the case of the Yazidis, a genocide took place, responsible ISIS, and we need to deal with that legacy. How does transitional justice address that? Transitional justice, set of processes, often considered 4, but we can also talk about 5, and those are: victims, survivors have a right to justice, have a right to truth, have a right to reparation, have a right to guarantees of non-repetition, and we all now talk about a 5th pillar, and is memory. But we can actually put them into 4, because for me, memory is a key element of truth and is a key element of reparation. If we say that the Yazidi Survivors Law is like a transitional justice framework, we would need to be able to find all of these elements I mentioned on that law. And I don't think the law does that. The law is a great reparation legal framework. So as a reparation, the pillar of reparation within transitional justice, aiming to address and redress the harm suffered by survivors, is a great example of what a reparation law should be. But I wouldn't take it to the other level to say this is a great transitional justice framework, because it is far from it. In terms of justice, where are we in terms of achieving justice for ISIS crimes? That's a major question. In terms of memory, where are we in relation to memory? And where are we in relation to truth for what happened? I think that contributions have taken place here and there, but those are patchy patchy responses so far. I think we need a full transitional justice framework to be able to deliver on that. And I think few countries have actually done that. And potentially, to my knowledge, the country, and this is my own country, that has a transitional justice system, a system with various pillars being delivered at the same time, rightly or wrongly, is Colombia. But we don't have a few countries, countries often do one or the other, do truth and perhaps justice after. And what you do is, in a way, you don't do them all at the same time. This is what we call in transitional justice sequencing. The ideal is to have them all happening together, because the deficiencies of one system complements the others. No, so the strengths of one will complement the deficiencies of other elements. What we have with the Yazidi Survivors Law is a reparation law, which in my view is quite good, no, as a law. And I have to actually congratulate the Iraqi government for having the leadership and the initiative to pass so fast, probably the fastest reparation law to have been approved worldwide to respond to such a terrible crime. So that needs to be acknowledged. And I said it, is a reality. Now, what is good about the law? It is comprehensive, as you were mentioning, Alannah. It includes various measures of reparation beyond compensation, but that should not be a surprise to us. It is not unique. There are many other countries in the world, and I mentioned to you Guatemala, Colombia, Peru, etc., that have laws that include different forms of reparation, not only compensation, and indeed international law and international human rights law call for various forms of reparation in order to be able to provide comprehensive repair to victims. Compensation for a survivor wouldn't be sufficient to make justice to what happened to them. You need to try to address irreparable harm in the most comprehensive manner, and you do it by complementing measures: compensation, restitution of land, restitution of identification documents, vocational training, collective reparation, education, housing, no? You need to find a way to address the harms that they have suffered. So in that sense, it's not unique. What I think is unique here is that the Iraqi government expressed its will to acknowledge that that needs to be done, to mix that also with guarantees of non-repetition, which is crucial. We don't do that much in a country like Iraq for the Yazidis if we just work on giving victims reparation for what happened to them, but we don't address the root causes of what allowed that violence, no? The discrimination against the Yazidis, that needs to be, that destroying intent against them is what we need to be able to get rid of. And the law has elements that can contribute to that. Now, the problem to me is the implementation gap. No, one thing is to say these beautiful things, and we have many beautiful written laws around the world, including in Colombia, including in Guatemala, including in Peru, the countries I was mentioning before. But what we need is implementation of those laws. And I think this is the challenge that Iraq is facing today. I think I welcome what Shireen was saying. Yes, survivors are receiving their monthly pension, which is fantastic. But the Yazidi Survivors Law includes other measures like education, for example, and we need to see also that moving in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Clara. Shireen, I wonder if you could comment from your own perspective or on behalf of the Yazidi Survivors Network about what Clara just spoke about and how your experience of accessing the YSL in the different levels of provision has been over the past 3 years.
The law is a good law, and as it's let's say it was established in a really short period of time, and there is some points in that law that if I mean in Iraqi laws, if you have a salary from the government, you cannot have another salary. So here, the survivors who are taking salaries from this law, they cannot just go and work with the government and have another salary from the government. I mean, so this is kind of a problem. They have maybe to solve it later on, but still it's a good law. And it's amazing if they just activate all the points in that law, because still there are so many like education, still it's really weak. I mean, they try to implement that point as well, but it's really weak. Not that much of students joined their education yet. So still, I mean, they have to work on that, as well as the other points. But for me, the most important is education, and then the salaries. And for sure, now the Iraqi government has decided to close all the camps, IDPs camps. So they have to provide people with at least a piece of land or a house to go there. Because for me, as for example, my house was destroyed by airstrike. So it's totally destroyed, and I cannot go back, and I cannot afford build another house. So in this case, if they close the IDPs, there are thousands of people they cannot go back because their houses are destroyed. Some houses were made of mud. Some of them were good built houses, but still they were excluded either, or maybe people just burned them. So it's a huge mess there. And the Iraqi government didn't start rebuilding the Sinjar area. So it's still 90%, 95% destroyed. And they have to work on that before closing the camps. And in this case, I mean, the survivors will suffer a lot because they are living in the camps, and now they have to go back to Sinjar with all that mass graves there. It's not opened yet, and they lost their beloved member or family, and their houses are destroyed, and there is no good services there, like water, electricity, and other services. So when they go there, they will find difficulty to cope with that, and maybe they cannot even go back to Sinjar because they don't have a place to go back to. So it's kind of complicated, and still there are a lot to work on as Yazidi Survivor Law and as Iraqi government to provide people with services and everything.
Thank you, Shireen. I wonder, Clara, if you're interested to follow up with your opinion on Shireen's comments there about the limitations of reparations, because in Iraq, as you know, most of us who are either living there or following the news know, there's over 100,000 in the Kurdistan region alone in camps. Not all of them qualify for the Yazidi Survivors Law, but many would say that they are still, and they still are, victims of what happened in displacement. So that's another clear example of the limitations of one framework. I wonder if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think it puts on the table the issue that many times we get it wrong when it comes down to who is a victim and who should be entitled to reparation. And for this, we advocate at GSF for clear participation mechanisms for victims, good mappings that allow us to really take a stock of who are the victims and to be able to respond to them. And maybe this could have been done a bit differently in relation to the Yazidi Survivors Law. But that's one point. The other point to me is the need to provide holistic reparation and to have not only a process that is reparatory, but also forms of reparation that aim to make whole the victim, no? And what Shireen is saying to us, victims will go back to Sinjar without having anything to rely on and just having to deal with their shattered lives and with their losses, also tells us that the process is not working. Because if those victims that are eligible under the law are not being able to experience a process that allows them to have complementary measures of reparation in a timely manner, in an effective manner, then the objective of the law is being defeated. And we need to address that. This is not unique to Iraq. I want to say it is not easy to provide reparation, but it's not impossible either. No? And we've learned by doing that you can actually do it well. And here I want to go back to the interim reparative measure project that GSF did with Nadia's initiative and with the help of others like Missionist, both in Sinjar and The Hook, where we were able to give interim reparative measures to more than 1,000 survivors there, and where we learned that it was possible to set up this process, that it was possible to understand the harms they suffered and to give those measures that were various types of measures, from compensation to collective reparation in a survivor-centered manner. So we are in conversations with the directorate in Iraq in order to share that experience that we were able to gather in order to share how best to do this kind of approaches. So I think there is a way, but we need to think about the process and about holistic approaches. No, there is no point in saying we have different forms of reparation for victims, but they don't get them in a timely manner. No, so you can get compensation, but compensation alone is not enough. If in 2 years, 3 years, you're going to get education, you need to think about the way they connect and complement each other. No, what about housing? Well, a victim needs housing to be able to deal also with education, no, to a place where you can feel you have a shelter. So is how do we find that complementary element? And again, for that, we need to be ready to work with others, because the Yazidi Survivors Law promises us various forms of reparation that are in the hands of different actors. So the housing actors, the health actors, the education actors, and we lawyers don't always know about those issues. So this is a call to work in a multi-stakeholder manner to ensure that we are effective with what we do. And I think this is at the heart of what GSF is trying to do. You need to bring to the table those that can make a difference. And that means bringing other disciplines, bringing other actors, but survivors always at the table. No, so these are the little things that I think can really make a difference for survivors.
Thank you. And to sort of follow up on that same vein, we talk a lot about transformative reparations and eliminating structural inequalities through reparations, especially for CRSV and through the Yazidi Survivors Law, does seem like a logical step towards righting the wrongs towards a particular group by aiming to establish true equality. On the other hand, and again, Shireen kind of highlighted this, writing past socioeconomic, also conflict, injustice and injustices. And in Iraq, there are no shortages of terrible things which have happened and caused terrible destruction in people's lives. That is a very big ask, and I think it might be worth just commenting on the specific example of Iraq, because there are a number of very active human rights and women's rights organizations relentlessly working for more than a decade towards removing discriminatory provisions in Iraqi legislation and also passing the law against domestic violence, which still has not been passed in federal Iraq. Kurdistan region of Iraq has anti-domestic violence legislation, but also it's incredibly high rates of femicide and domestic violence. So I guess this is a question to both of you, but Shireen, if we could go to you first, I mean, perhaps you could speak a little bit also specifically on the work of your survivors network. How broad have you found your advocacy has had to be? And how is it operating in the context of Iraq as well? Perhaps you could comment on that.
Yeah, so as our network, we are trying our best to do advocacy and to focus on the issues that we are facing, because I think without advocacy, lots of issues will become bigger and bigger with the time. But we are trying to do our best to make advocacy, and I think it's work. Sometimes you are getting some results, and sometimes as a genocide, it's something huge, so it needs time for some other stuff. Like we tried our best to advocate for UNITAD team to stay in Iraq longer because they still didn't finish their work, but alas, we couldn't do much for that. So they are leaving, and still there is lots of investigations they didn't do. There are investigations. I think I'm not sure if they finished all their investigations, because some of their witnesses I know, so they are still working on that. And as well as the mass graves, they were supporting this operation of exhumation and opening the mass graves. So it's this was like a disaster for us, for the Yazidi community, that UNITAD is leaving. They will not support the teams of opening the mass graves anymore. So the mass graves, we feel that it will stay there, and no one will open those mass graves and identify those remains. And still people are waiting for their beloved one. They feel that, okay, one day they will return back, and they are still in captive. And we know that it's a war, and lots of them, they will not come back again. So opening these mass graves was such a great thing for the Yazidi community, so they can know that they just lost their beloved people, and they will not come again. And I know it's really hard, but knowing what happened to the one that you love, if it was our parents or our siblings or our relatives, it's better to know that they are died and they are not coming again, instead of waiting them for whole your life, and they will not come again. So I know it's a really hard fact, but it's still better to know that they are not coming again. So UNITAD was doing a great thing, and we hope that they will do the whole investigations, and they will support the opening mass graves and the work they did. I mean, everything was amazing. But now, and suddenly we hear it was not in unofficially. It was from social media or through friends. We know it that UNITAD is not working anymore. So it was like a huge shock for the Yazidi community, because we feel that the Iraqi authorities, they don't care about the Yazidi cause, and they are forgetting that with what is happening in the world right now. So, and still we are suffering a lot, as I told you before, and as I mentioned that there is no rehabilitation program, there is no rebuilding program in Sinjar, nothing. So everything is like we feel that it's not, they don't care because of the Yazidi Survivor Law, but still they are, I don't know if they have, let's say, important things to focus on, but still, the Yazidi genocide, it was a huge, affected the whole community. So now, because the Iraqi government, they are eligible to to give people compensations and to do stuff, because of the laws that they signed on the international laws. So I think they have to focus more on the Yazidis, and they have to compensate them. They have to paying more attention to their cause. As you know, the 10th anniversary of the Yazidi genocide is so close. It's 3rd of August, and now it's 3rd of June. So they have to do something about that. A decade it's a long time, and so still staff are just we are living in a mess, and people don't know what they should do, because the IDPs, they don't know either they will have a chance to immigrate, or they will go back to Sinjar, or they will stay in the camps, and they don't know anything about their future. The things are unstable here, so it's just a mess actually, and all everything. It's complicated, and I don't know.
Thank
Yeah.
you. No, thank you for sharing all of that. I wonder if actually it makes sense to go straight to Clara, on sort of behalf of the Global Survivors Fund, to just say, what should people be doing? Like, what is the advice, and what is your technical advice and experience? Because it seems to me that, the political will of those in power, like Shireen was saying, is very relevant for the implementation of reparative programs and support for affected communities. And if they fall out of the priorities of the government, as I think we can see with the wind down of UNITAD and moves of the Iraqi government to sort of they would say take back more of their sovereignty, but be less clear on what will follow. It does feel like the tide is shifting a bit in terms of priorities. So I guess my question to you, Clara, is kind of, what is the role of civil society, survivor groups, and how can we counter these developments?
Alannah, I think the question is very important, because it allows me to put attention to the role that survivors play, the advocacy role, not only that they play, but also that civil society organizations have to play, to ensure that we are able to counter the decisions that at times are made wrongly about whether or not to support UNITAD or reparation policies, etc. I think it's crucial to keep the guard. It's crucial for survivors to be organized. I think you were asking before about the continuum of violence. How do we deal with discrimination? How can we ensure transformative reparation? And to me, one of the key takes for GSF is that we need to listen to survivors. We need to work with them, support them, so that they can articulate not only their individual voice, but also their collective voices, and they can advocate. And we need to advocate with them, and we need to bring them with us and link them to broader networks internationally, so that their voices always are heard and can shape political processes and can put pressure on the ones we have to put pressure, so that decisions are rightly made. No? And I think this is crucial moving forward. So I want to accentuate the importance of participation and her leadership, but also that she's part of the survivors network. We need to support her and to support the network so that they are heard. But let me say also something about the continuum of violence. Yes, you might say one thing is the genocide and what happened during the genocide. At the end of the day, there is a continuum there, no? There is gender discrimination. There are structures that have allowed both forms of violence to happen by different actors in different ways, and we need to be able to tackle them all, no? And again, participation is crucial, and advocacy is absolutely crucial. And we need to ensure that non-repetition is taken very seriously, and that justice as a form of reparation is also taken very seriously. It's not one or the other. It is not guarantees of non-repetition or justice or compensation. No, it's all. We need all of these forms of reparation to happen, and to happen in a systemic manner. And we need to ensure that the survivors movement is one, that is not divided, not that some are advocating for domestic violence and others are advocating for the Yazidi Survivors Law, but that they work together, because that is what is going to make their voices stronger. No? And through my work at GSF, what I've seen is that the multi-stakeholder approach also makes a difference. No? It is not the state against us and us against the state. No. In between, there are many layers of actors all wanting to work together. And we have fantastic people in Iraq, also at the directorate, etc., that are trying to do their work on a daily basis. We need to build on that, on the positives, because reparation has not come easily anywhere. And we need to work with others to make it happen. And again, reparation is not only the individual reparation or the collective, it's also the non-repetition. Non-repetition is a form of reparation. So we need to think very holistically about it.
Thank you so much. I wonder if I could ask one or two quick technical questions to Clara, just about the implementation of reparations. Unless, Shireen, you have anything you want to say or comment, feel free to jump in at any point if you want to comment on what Clara just spoke. I have a few questions about the implementation of reparative administrative programs, such as the one outlined in the YSL. So, based on your experiences with supporting implementation of reparative programs in other settings, what is to be understood under the term technical assistance?
Okay, through technical support, I will call it support more than assistance, because in reality, states and those that are obliged to create these types of remedies at the national level that are administrative in nature, they know a lot. So what we are doing is really supporting them in their work so that they can do it as best as they could actually do it. But what do we mean by that? Is the sharing of relevant practice and lessons learned coming from other places, is the sharing of the voices of survivors. No, something that has happened in technical assistance, and here I go to the assistance, is that experience or that practice comes without having heard victims and having heard survivors. And many times reparation goes bad in practice because we didn't take into account their voices or their views. You know, they know best than us, than any expert, how reparation should be provided or what they need. That is, for example, secure, safe for them. No issues of safety, of trust, of who or where are questions that they will answer better than anyone. So we need to listen to them and we need to be able to work with them. So that sharing of those voices, of the experience coming from them, that is something that not many have done. GSF is putting at the table. But GSF has also been gathering their voices and relevant experience from around the world through something that we call the Global Reparations Study. That is a study currently in 25 countries around the world where conflict-related sexual violence has been systematic and generalized. And we've been looking very carefully at what these states, and they are in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, in the Americas, etc., and Europe, what they've done in order to address this and what can we learn from those countries. And we've worked with survivors and with survivors networks to bring this to the table with very clear recommendations and the gathering of the evidence. So through that, we are also sharing relevant evidence. And from our IRM projects, technical support also means for us that in projects like I was mentioning before in Iraq, we did the IRM with Nadia's initiative. From that project, we learned a lot. It was almost 4 years of work with survivors in Sinjar, in the hoop, making it happen. So you learn a lot about what works in a context like that. And then we can share that practice from how to register a survivor in a survivor-centered manner, what questions to ask and what questions not to ask, how to listen to them, how to co-create the process. All of this evidence is what we call technical support, what we can actually share and then dialogue with our, with our equals. This is not about who's on top of whom, but it's about creating spaces where you can dialogue, where you can exchange, and where you can build, always bringing survivors to the table. So we also try to ensure that our technical support is not only expert-led, but again, if there is an expert, the expert is the survivor, and we create a space for their voices because they really need to be taken seriously.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Shireen, I wonder if I can ask you another question based on, we were talking a bit before about co-creation and, the way that having a multi-stakeholder approach is really effective. Do you think you could talk a little bit and explain more about the work of the Survivors Network and how it's operated, with organizations across Iraq, across the world, for example, IOM, or in conversations with, the directorate, and how your experience of kind of working together has been useful or not, but some comments and reflections on that process would be really interesting.
Yes. So, I'm a part of Yazidi Survivor Network, and I'm a part of the SVN network. And now recently I joined C4GR. I think it's committee or something. So I recently joined them. I didn't memorize the name yet. So yeah, all of these networks are something good, and they are trying all of them to do for survivor cause. The Yazidi Survivor Network is supported by YESDA, and the SVN is supported by IOM, and what C4G are doing is something amazing. All of that, and they are trying to build the capacity of survivors and to empower them to ask for their rights. But still, we need a lot, because lots of survivors need to be, to build their capacity and to be empowered more. And still, we are not specialized in the field that we have to work in. Like some of us should be empowered how to talk to media or how to post about the issues that we have, or some of us should be empowered in, let's say, in reparational justice. Is it right? If I'm not wrong. And on lots of fields that we should be empowered, and these NGOs, they are doing amazing things, and I know they have so many projects, and there are lots of stuff going on, but still we need to be specialized in some field. We can just focus on that topics and to focus on the issues that is
Thank you. And I think I might just add here that that's something C4JR, the Coalition for Just Reparations, is really trying to do, because it's an umbrella of 34 different NGOs working in this space. And we have different working groups, like the advocacy working group, the ethical engagement working group, which just had a training on working and engaging with media, the criminal justice working group, which has been doing amazing work on UNITAD advocacy, and so forth. the rehabilitation working group as well, I should add. I wonder if I can ask Clara one more quite specific technical question. So it might be interesting actually also for Shireen to comment on this after. But if we just look at the YSL, the Yazidi Survivors Law legislation, there are two main groups of eligible beneficiaries. So we have women and girls on the one hand and boys abducted by ISIS on the other. And my question to you is, does the implementation of the YSL, including outreach, application, verification, delivery of benefits, require considering different factors or having even different approaches to survivors belonging to these groups? And if so, what sorts of things should be taken into consideration?
Alannah, yes, absolutely. While domestic reparation programs in principle are presented as remedies that aim to provide the same form of reparation to all victims, no? That's how they present it to us. In reality, it is a bit different because we need to really have a survivor-centered approach. And that means taking into account what is relevant from each victim to be able to respond to the victim and being able to ensure what domestic reparation programs promise, and that is access to reparation. We go to a domestic reparation program and not to a court to claim reparation because the domestic reparation program promises us quick, fast, survivor-centered access to reparation. And if I really want to enable the access element, then I need to, for example, deal with context, deal with intersectionality. What does it mean for me being a woman, age X, to be able to speak about what happened to me and to be able to claim reparation in Sinjar, for example, or in the Hook, no? What does it mean for a woman that is, for example, an elderly woman, no? How do I take that into account? And that applies to everything. An example, a survivor of conflict-related sexual violence will not necessarily speak about what happened because of a stigma, re-victimization, etc. That means that survivor, in contrast to, for example, a victim of an enforced disappearance, the relative of a person who was enforced disappeared, will need trusted spaces to be able to talk, no? There you see, just to fill a form or to have an interview, you will need to have a different approach to be able to enable access. And the same during the registration process. What do I need to provide the victims in terms of psychosocial support? Because this cannot just simply be that I expect the person to come and complete a form and reopen wounds without me being able to provide a tailored approach. And again, that tailored approach will vary if it's a woman, if it's a man, if it's a boy, if it's a girl, etc. So yes, best practice tells us that we need to be able to tailor the response. And there are different ways in which we can do it through all those elements, from the registration, the identification, the verification, providing the measures during the whole process. We need to. There are different ways. I wish I could, there are from camouflage measures to other forms in which we can do that. But the important thing is to be very aware that a survivor-centeredness implies us recognizing the obstacles that every individual might face when trying to access reparation and overcoming them, setting measures that will help us to overcome them.
Thank you. Linked to that, I'll just quickly add and ask you, the Global Survivors Fund in April last year published a statement asking for the removal of an extra legal requirement demanding applicants in Iraq to submit criminal complaints and annex investigative papers to its YSL application. Could you quickly summarize arguments against introducing such a requirement?
Well, let me first start there with something you just said some moments ago, and is the importance of the Coalition for Just Reparation. I have to say that the coalition has been essential to ensure that every time that there is a new challenge to be an obstacle to access reparation, you've been there trying to ensure that victims can really access reparation, no? And I do remember very well how you really became super active a year ago when the decision of the committee under the Yazidi Survivors Law was to require this additional requirement that was not clearly coming from the law, but was actually a decision from the committee to make survivors go and file a criminal complaint in order to be able to access reparation, which again, let me put it in very simple terms. This is no justice. So if what this was meant to be was to ensure justice, this is no justice because it is not leading to any form of accountability for the crimes they suffered. So no justice, no reparation on that ground. But two, this is a bureaucratic requirement that all that aims and produces at the end of the day is re-victimization for the victims, and yet not timely and adequate access to reparation. So we shouldn't have that. As I said before, a domestic reparation program is set up to enable quick, easy access to reparation. And this is completely the contrary, defeats the purpose of a domestic reparation program. What we should be doing is ensuring that we can help victims to access what is their right to have today, not hamper the process, no? And I think, yes, this is no justice. This is a bureaucratic requirement, in my view, with all due respect. I don't think lessons learned from other countries, like, for example, Colombia or Peru, they enable access to reparation through a presumption of good faith. That means that the victim comes and tells me what happened, fills a document, and that allows the state to presume that what the victim is saying is true, and that is enough to access reparation. It is down to the state to prove the contrary, not to the victim. And we shouldn't put the victim to have to go to a criminal system for what I've heard from victims in Iraq that are having to tell what happened to them, to authorities that have not been trained, not even on how to take a proper account from a victim, a testimony from a victim. So we are re-victimizing, seriously re-victimizing, rather than enhancing access to reparation.
Earlier this year in Geneva, I know the Global Survivors Fund hosted leadership of two key bodies involved in this, both established under the auspices of the Federal Ministry of Labour and Social Affairs, which we call MOLSA. And so both were tasked with implementing the YSL, the General Directorate for Survivors Affairs, and the committee authorized to review and decide on applications and appeals, obviously very much engaged in that extra legal requirement that you just spoke about. Can you tell us more about the visit and further kind of work GSF plans to do to support YSL implementation?
Yes, Alannah, that was a great opportunity to have in Geneva, not only key people representing the government as the entities you just mentioned and the director of the directorate and a key member of the committee, but also we had some civil society organizations with us and of course survivors, because as I said before, survivors must be at the center of any discussion, political or not, on reparation. This is the right. The conversation and the dialogue was great because it allowed us to better inform our views about the Yazidi Survivors Law implementation, to hear very carefully what the government saw as potential challenges to what they are doing, opportunities they also saw, but also to hear from survivors what they thought of it. And one key element that came out from it was the need to really consider how to turn education as a form of reparation into a reality. This is promised under the Yazidi Survivors Law, but so far we have not gone far on implementing this form of reparation. And as a result of that, we have continued in conversations with the directorate. And I am very happy to say that later this week, our director at GSF, Esther Dingelmans, together with a group of experts, including Iraqis, including survivors, but also experts on education from Nigeria, a great project we are doing currently in Nigeria with victims of Boko Haram, will be going to visit Iraq. They will be near Sinjar and in the Hook and in Erbil, etc., trying to gather a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities to provide education as a form of reparation. And as a result of that, a report will come out with very clear recommendations. This is thinking about how best to support the Iraqi government in its clear attempt to really fulfill this right. And so we are very happy. We are very much looking forward to it because, again, Iraq has again a unique opportunity to turn this into reality, and this can teach many lessons to the world about how to do, trauma-informed education as reparation for survivors. So we want to hear from survivors. We want to see what you can do, in the sector, and hopefully, this can help us to move forward on that measure. So fingers crossed.
Thank you, and what a positive and uplifting note to end on, because there are great opportunities to do more and do better at this. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing your experience. And thank you so much to Shireen too for joining us earlier in the conversation. And we wish her all the best, and congratulations again. Clara, it's been really great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
No, my pleasure. And thank you so much for the invitation, and to survivors like Shireen, all my respect. It is for women like her that GSF exists, and we just want to make sure that her voice is heard and that of other survivors too. I am amazed at what they can transform, and I've seen how many things they have transformed already. So, Nadia is another great example. So inspirational leaders to me.